The first thing that hit Carson Vell before he even saw the alien was the smell. Acrid, sweet, metallic like burnt caramel soaked in battery acid. He gagged behind his rebreather mask and waved a hand in the air as if that would help. "Hold still, Earthborn," said a voice beside him. Carson turned and met the gaze of Commander Lur, a bipedal creature with translucent skin that shimmered faintly under the hangar lights. Lur's eyes glowed copper. No pupils. No eyelids. Just orbs that glared like he was always mid-interrogation. "I'm not even moving," Carson said, adjusting the strap on his mask. Lur jabbed a three-fingered hand toward the airlock. "You hesitate. That is movement in the mind." Carson rolled his eyes and stepped through the airlock door into the exchange chamber where a long metal table gleamed like it had just been scrubbed with acid. Which, come to think of it, it probably had. "Sit," Lur ordered. Carson sat. A second alien entered. This one was shorter, with a segmented lower body like an armored centipede and stubby arms barely long enough to reach its own waist. Carried a metal tray with something hidden under a dome-shaped cloche. "Is this necessary?" Carson asked, watching the tray get placed in front of him. "You are the first of your kind to try food from the Zernathi delegation," Lur said. "We require your reaction. And your vitals." Carson glanced at the dome. "And if I refuse?" "You signed consent forms. Medical team is on standby." Carson sighed and removed the dome. The thing on the plate looked like 3 cubes of meat suspended in a gelatinous spheroid. It shimmered purple, pulsed faintly, and let out a hiss like it was carbonated. "Does it move?" Carson asked. "Only when threatened." "Great." He picked up the utensil, provided a blunt, 2-pronged object that looked like a tuning fork, and speared one of the cubes. Its gelatin casing trembled. He sniffed it. The burnt caramel smell intensified. "What's it called?" Carson asked. "Growlith. A delicacy. Eaten during Zernathi death rituals. Comforting." He braced himself and took a bite. At first, nothing. Then warmth spread across his tongue, followed by a sharp tang, like citrus and iron. Then came a slow, smoky heat that reminded him of habanero peppers. His eyes watered. He swallowed. "That was actually good." Lur tilted his head. "You ingested the entire piece?" "Yeah." "Your eyes are leaking." "Yeah, that's normal." "Spicy. But tasty. You may consume the rest." "For calibration." Carson didn't hesitate. He took the second cube, then the third. Each one hit a different sensory profile: sweet, umami, then something that tasted like roasted garlic dipped in lightning. He leaned back in his chair once the plate was empty. "That's some wild stuff," he said. The med team rushed in, scanners floating around him. "How long before the toxins kick in?" one of the techs asked Lur. "Toxins?" Carson sat up straighter. "Wait, what?" Lur didn't answer. He turned to the shorter alien and spoke in rapid clicks. Carson looked at the med tech. "Did he just say toxins?" The tech nodded. "The growlith is lethal to most species not born on Zernath. It destabilizes cellular membranes. Causes rupture, organ failure. We were going to administer an antidote after your reaction. And you didn't think to tell me this before I ate it? You signed the waiver." Carson stood up too fast and had to steady himself. His stomach churned slightly, but only from the anxiety. "Vitals stable," the tech said. "No signs of cellular breakdown." "How long does that take?" "Minutes. Sometimes seconds." Carson looked around. No dizzy spells. No cramps. Just a slight burning on his lips. "Can I get more of that stuff?" he asked. Lur stiffened. "You request additional portions?" "Yeah. I wouldn't serve it at a barbecue, but it hits the right notes." "That third cube? That was incredible." "You are not dying?" "Not unless you're planning something else." The short alien scurried off, and Lur remained silent for several long seconds before finally saying, "Prepare 3 more servings." Carson grinned. "Now we're talking." 3 hours later, Carson was lying in the infirmary under observation. He'd eaten 2 more servings of growlith before the medical unit insisted he rest. The Zernathi scientists were already dissecting his DNA in a separate lab, trying to figure out why he hadn't exploded from the inside out. Dr. Selna, the human mission physician, examined his latest blood work. "Your enzymes are through the roof," she said. "But stable. You're not reacting the way any of the simulations predicted." Carson sat up. He was pale, sweaty, and mildly nauseous, but coherent. "That's because I'm not a simulation," he said. "Maybe I just metabolize it differently. That's not how biology works." "Maybe it is now." Selna gave him a look. "You're not eating any more of that stuff until we know what it's doing to you. You want to stop the first guy to survive alien death food from going back for seconds?" "Yes. Because if you go into shock, I'm the one who has to call your mom." Carson groaned and lay back down. 2 days later, the Zernathi held a formal banquet to honor the human exception. Carson was the guest of honor. Lur stood beside him as a fresh platter of growlith was brought out. This one garnished with slivers of dried Zernathi fruit and what looked like pickled roots. "Do you wish to proceed?" Lur asked. Selna stood nearby, arms crossed, medkit ready. "I'm still alive, aren't I?" Carson said, taking a seat. He took a bite. This time, he noticed the aftertaste lingered longer, a numbing sensation along his molars. Not painful, just odd. "I think this one's spicier," he said. Lur nodded. "This is the matured variant, aged for 30 cycles." Carson took another bite. "Still good. A little more intense, like wasabi and battery acid had a baby, but I dig it." Lur remained silent for a moment. Then he turned toward the observers. "He consumes growlith without cellular decay. This changes our understanding of protein compatibility across species." Carson looked around. The room was full of Zernathi watching him like he was some kind of sacred relic. "You guys ever considered opening a restaurant?" he asked. "Earth's got a whole market for weird fusion cuisine." Lur said this was a weapon. "What?" "The growlith. It was engineered during the Vexen Wars. A biotoxin disguised as a ceremonial dish. Delivered during peace talks. It decimated 12 species before the truth was discovered." Carson paused mid-chew. "You fed me a war crime?" Lur looked at him. "You asked for seconds." Carson swallowed slowly. "Yeah, I guess I did." Back aboard the Earth diplomatic vessel, Carson sat in the debriefing chamber with Ambassador Renner. "You're telling me you willingly ate a known alien bioweapon?" Renner asked. "No one told me it was a bioweapon until after I ate it." "And your reaction was to eat more?" "It was good." Renner rubbed his temples. "The Zernathi are now offering us trade rights on their culinary exports. They think you're some kind of evolutionary anomaly. Glad I could help. You're grounded from further tastings until we complete a full metabolic analysis." "Come on, I was fine." "You threw up twice last night." "That was unrelated." "It was blue." Carson sighed, leaned back in his chair, and muttered, "Totally worth it." The Zernathi returned a week later with new dishes. This time, they had less lethal intent and more curiosity. Carson was presented with a bowl of translucent spheres that burst with flavor when bitten. Each was laced with trace neurotoxins meant to paralyze small predators. Carson popped one in his mouth. "Whoa," he said, blinking rapidly. "That tastes like mint and electricity." Selna hovered nearby with a scanner. "Your heart rate just spiked." "I feel alive." "You're sweating." "It's invigorating." Lur stepped forward. "You are the only known being compatible with the full Zernathi flavor spectrum. We wish to study your physiology in greater depth." Carson paused. "Define study." "Full cellular mapping. Biopsy. Possibly marrow extraction." He leaned away. "Let's pump the brakes. Maybe just stick with the flavor testing." Selna nodded. "No marrow. That's off the table." Carson grinned. "But the food stays on it." The examination lab wasn't built for comfort. The walls pulsed with a soft bioluminescence that made Carson feel like he was inside a jellyfish. Glass panels displayed real-time readings of his body charts, graphs, and one particularly unnerving image of his liver cycling through colors like a mood ring. A thin Zernathi researcher hovered nearby, adjusting one of the scanners. Its limbs were unusually long, with fingers that bent backward at the knuckles. It wore no clothing, only a thin layer of iridescent secretion that apparently regulated body temperature. Carson tried not to stare. Your hemoglobin density has increased by 0.07 units since the last ingestion, it said, not looking up. Is that good news or the kind that comes with a funeral plan? Statistically rare. Possibly an adaptive response. Possibly coincidence. Helpful. Dr. Selna stood behind a transparent console, arms folded, watching the scan data scroll. Her eyes didn't blink once during the last 2 minutes. You said your tongue felt like it was buzzing this morning. It did. Like I bit a power line. Still numb. Not numb. Just humming. Like it's aware of itself in a way that tongues shouldn't be. The Zernathi made a sound like water boiling in a tin can. That is not a symptom we have recorded in other species, it said. I'm starting to think that's your motto. Selna pulled up another chart, this one showing neurotransmitter levels. Your dopamine spiked after the last serving. Did you feel unusually euphoric? I told Lur his mandibles looked majestic. So yeah, probably. Your cortisol stayed low even during the third taste cycle. That's not just resistance. That's pleasure. Are you saying I'm addicted to alien war snacks? I'm saying we're looking at a cascade response we don't fully understand. The Zernathi turned toward them, its neck rippling slightly. We have prepared a variant with altered alkaloid balance. It should produce a stronger reaction. Selna raised a hand. Not yet. He hasn't fully metabolized the last sample. We need a baseline before you start layering new compounds. Carson sat up on the exam table, dangling his legs. I feel fine. A little wired, but nothing's twitching that shouldn't be. No more ingestion until you sleep 8 hours and pass a full metabolic panel. And hydration. You're borderline desiccated. I've had water. 2 sips of recycled pressurization runoff. That doesn't count. The Zernathi tapped a control. A small hatch in the wall opened, revealing a tray with a bulbous fruit-like object inside a containment dome. Visual stimulus test only, it said. No tasting. This specimen is engineered for hallucination through scent alone. Carson leaned closer. It smells like wet pine needles and burnt toast. Selna pointed to a monitor. His pupil dilation just jumped. Carson grinned. I can kinda hear colors now. The Zernathi seemed pleased. This is within expected thresholds. Selna stepped between Carson and the dome. No more exposure today. But I'm already seeing melodies. You're interrupting my groove. You can groove after you urinate into 3 separate containers and pass a hydration index. Carson slid off the table with a resigned sigh. Fine. But if I start dreaming in algebra again, that's on you. They led him back to the sleeping quarters, a stark chamber with low gravity and silence so deep it made his own breathing sound like thunder. He lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling, which undulated gently like a slow heartbeat. Sleep didn't come easily. His skin felt warm, his thoughts tangled but oddly lucid. When he finally drifted off, he dreamed of a field of floating fruit that sang in harmony, each melody a different flavor. He woke up 6 hours later with the taste of lemon and static on his tongue. By midday, he was back in the lab. Selna handed him a glucose gel. You're hypoglycemic. Probably from the metabolic overdrive. You'll need a calorie load before any more testing. Carson squeezed the gel into his mouth. Tastes like sadness. It's not for flavor. It's to keep your organs from cannibalizing themselves. Charming. The Zernathi returned with a new tray. This time the cloche was transparent. Inside was a spiral-shaped delicacy that shimmered like opal, suspended in a thick blue glaze. This formulation is not categorized as food by any known species, the researcher said. It is used in Zernathi metallurgical bonding ceremonies. Ingested only by initiates under supervision. Selna stepped back. No, absolutely not. Carson tilted his head. Hold on. What does it do? It binds to calcium structures. In Zernathi, it temporarily reinforces exoskeletal segments. In others, it has caused irreversible ossification. That's a hard pass, Selna said, already reaching for the override panel. Carson raised a hand. Wait, what's the dosage threshold? The Zernathi hesitated. Unknown. Never tested on soft-boned organisms. And what's it taste like? Reports are conflicting. One initiate described it as the sensation of remembering a melody you've never heard. Another described pain. Carson tapped the table. Give me an atom's worth. Just a smear. Absolutely not, Selna said. This isn't a joke, Carson. I'm not joking. I'm curious. Controlled dose. Monitored reaction. The Zernathi looked to Selna. We can apply it topically to the tongue. No swallowing. Duration 3 seconds. She exhaled through her nose. Fine. But I'm doubling your calcium blockers. And if your jaw locks up, I'm not cracking it open for you. They administered the sample using a fine-tipped applicator. It touched the tip of Carson's tongue, and immediately his eyes widened. Oh wow, he said. It's like, I can feel the shape of my teeth from the inside. Selna flicked her scanner. No calcification yet. Pupil response normal. I can taste geometry. That's new. The Zernathi took notes rapidly, its fingers tapping in asynchronous rhythms. After 5 minutes, the sensation faded. Carson flexed his jaw. Still mobile, he said. No bone hardening. Just a weird craving for chalk. Selna handed him a mineral tablet. Chew this. Slowly. Carson bit down. Tastes like drywall. Exactly the point. Later that evening, he sat in the communal lounge aboard the Earth diplomatic vessel, sipping rehydrated ginger tea. Across from him, Lur examined a data pad projecting Carson's metabolic readouts. The bonding agent did not cause skeletal fusion, Lur observed. You experienced only sensory distortion. Yeah, like my mouth was a cathedral and every tooth was a bell. Lur considered this. You consistently survive ingestion of compounds engineered to disrupt fundamental biology. This is statistically improbable. Maybe human biology isn't as fragile as you thought. Or perhaps yours is anomalous. Carson leaned back. You know, back home I used to eat street tacos from a guy who washed his hands in motor oil. This feels safer by comparison. Lur's gaze narrowed. You voluntarily consumed hazardous earth food? Hazardous is subjective. Tasted amazing. The more we study you, the less predictable your responses become. That's humanity in a nutshell. Chaos in a cardigan. Lur's fingers twitched. We would like to conduct a deep tissue study. Carson raised an eyebrow. Define deep. Femoral marrow. Antibody isolation. Full protein mapping. Hard pass. We will offer diplomatic concessions. Still no. Selna entered the lounge holding a fresh stack of readings. His electrolytes are stabilizing. No lingering toxins. He's cleared for low-risk tastings tomorrow. Carson raised his cup. To low-risk madness. Lur tilted his head. We have no such phrase in Zernathi. Add it to the list. That night, Carson dreamed of a spiral staircase made of sugar, descending into a canyon of flavor. When he woke, he had no idea what it meant, but he was already looking forward to breakfast. Carson stood barefoot in the Zernathi hydro chamber, steam curling around his ankles. The chamber floor, covered in soft, sponge-like moss, squelched underfoot with each shift of weight. He wore nothing but a sterile wrap and a chest biosensor patch. Directly in front of him hovered a translucent pod, suspended by warm magnetic pulses. Inside floated a pale, veined fruit roughly the size of a grapefruit, continuously exhaling faint strands of vapor that shimmered red in the mist. You're serious about this being a palate cleanser? He asked, watching the vapors twist into spirals. It neutralizes residual alkaloids and recalibrates neural flavor mapping, said the Zernathi technician, who had 6 arms and a neck that could rotate a full circle. It is not consumed. Inhalation only. 3 breaths. Carson glanced back at Selna, who stood just outside the sealed observation hatch, arms crossed, datapad in one hand. She gave a nod. No smile, no encouragement, just a nod. That was her version of greenlighting a roller coaster. He stepped closer and took the first breath. The vapor hit like menthol and copper, flooding his sinuses. A warm pressure spread behind his eyes. He blinked once, then twice, as the chamber walls briefly seemed to expand, then returned to normal. No pain, no nausea. Just a sudden, sharp memory of biting into a raw lemon as a child. Second breath, the technician prompted, adjusting one of the pod's stabilizers. He inhaled again. This time, the vapor smelled like freshly turned soil after rain. The floor beneath him seemed to soften, or maybe his feet just grew more sensitive. A sound, almost like distant wind chimes, echoed in his ears. Third breath. The final inhalation brought with it a taste that wasn't a taste at all, more like the sensation of a word on the tip of the tongue. Unspoken but fully formed. He exhaled slowly, blinking up at the pod. "I think I just remembered what my grandmother's kitchen smelled like," he said. "That is within acceptable parameters," the technician replied. "Did you say recalibrates neural flavor mapping? Because now plain water's probably going to taste like regret." "You are cleared for the sensory gauntlet," the technician said, gesturing toward the adjacent chamber. The gauntlet, as it turned out, was a curved corridor lined with hanging biogels, each shimmering with a different hue. The idea was to walk through slowly while each gel emitted a timed aerosol release, triggering a cascade of flavor impressions. It was how the Zernathi tested their own young for culinary aptitude. Carson stepped in. The first gel released a cool mist that tasted like unripe berries crushed against metal. The second, warmer, evoked a memory of scorched toast and ozone. By the fourth, he paused, tongue pressed to the roof of his mouth. Did that one just taste like confusion? Cognitive dissonance, the technician confirmed. It is meant to remind you of a decision you regret but would make again. Yeah, that tracks. By the time he exited the corridor, the biosensor patch was blinking amber. Selna met him at the decontamination alcove with a mineral solution and a protein biscuit. "Vitals are elevated but stable," she said, watching him chew. "You're pushing your system harder with each exposure. I'm seeing early signs of metabolic fatigue." "I didn't even do anything strenuous," Carson said, washing the biscuit down with the mineral drink. "I walked through a hallway and got misted." "Your body's interpreting the stimuli as exertion. Neural activity spikes during flavor processing. You're burning through magnesium reserves at twice the normal rate. So more bananas? More injections." "Bananas aren't going to cut it anymore." Back in the central lab, Lur stood over a display of Carson's recent test results. "You have now tolerated 37 distinct compounds. No known species has ever processed more than 12 without systemic collapse." Carson pulled on a fresh tunic and leaned against the nearby console. "Maybe I'm what you'd call gustatorially gifted. Your tolerance is not merely survival. You are adapting. Your cellular structures are beginning to anticipate the chemical profiles. This is not digestion. It is prediction." Selna tapped a point on the screen. "He's showing anticipatory enzyme activation. His pancreas is producing precursor compounds before exposure." "That's not supposed to happen." "No," she said. "It's not." Lur circled the console. "We have prepared one final test. No known sapient has endured it beyond 3 seconds." "Let me guess," Carson said. "Flavored radiation? Acidic plasma? Something that tastes like betrayal?" Lur tapped a control and a panel slid open, revealing a shallow bowl filled with a black, viscous paste. It shimmered faintly, like oil on water. "This is called Varnath essence." It was used historically by Zernathi philosophers during the ritual of thought severance. It induces complete sensory inversion. Carson frowned. "That sounds like something I'd read in a lawsuit. It is not lethal, but it is profoundly disorienting. Most cannot endure the full effect." Selna narrowed her eyes. "What's the chemical mechanism?" Neurochemical dissonance. It activates taste receptors in conflicting sequences. The brain cannot categorize the input. It either adapts or shuts down the sensation entirely. Carson stepped forward and peered into the bowl. What does it taste like? No one can agree. Some experience memory loss. Others report synesthetic collapse. One individual claimed it tasted like the feeling of lying. That's either horrible or fascinating. Selma moved between him and the bowl. You've given enough data. We have enough to write 12 papers and overhaul half our understanding of cross-species gustatory biology. You don't need to do this. Carson didn't respond immediately. He looked at the bowl, then at his hands, flexing his fingers slowly. I want to know what it does, he said. Not just for you. For us. If my body's doing something no one else's can, I want to see how far it goes. Lur inclined his head. A minimal amount. The size of a single grain. The technician brought over a sterile applicator and dabbed a microscopic bead of the paste onto Carson's tongue. Everything stopped. For a full 2 seconds, his brain seemed to forget what flavor was. Then sensation roared back. Cold warmth, soft sharpness. The echo of a scream he hadn't heard. He tasted the absence of touch. He felt the color blue as if it were resting on his teeth. Then it was gone. He staggered, caught himself on the table. Selma was already beside him, checking his pupils, running a scan. He let out a slow breath. That was like tasting a paradox. No organ damage, Selma said after a beat. Neural activity spiked, then normalized. Carson wiped his mouth. Okay, that was enough. Lur stepped forward. You have completed the full spectrum. You are the first non-Zernathi to survive it. Carson raised an eyebrow. Do I get a ribbon? Selma handed him a sealed water pouch. You get electrolytes. Later, aboard the Earth vessel, Carson sat in the mess hall with a tray of bland rehydrated rations. Across from him, Selma stirred her nutrient mush without much interest. They're sending over a full report to the Interplanetary Dietary Council, she said. Apparently they're considering naming a new receptor response after you. He chewed thoughtfully. What's it called? Temporal gustatory anticipation. The Vell threshold. He snorted. Sounds like a sci-fi novel. It kind of is. He looked down at his tray. This tastes like cardboard. That's because it is. He grinned, shook his head, and kept eating. The flavors were dull, the texture uninspiring, but for once that was exactly what he wanted.